Good afternoon, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather, and happy Tuesday to you. We're going to talk about Tropical Storm Debby and some shifts in the forecast today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area, and what we are looking at here is the westward shift with the system expected to move back into the Atlantic Ocean, but then make a hard turn back to the left. And as it moves farther north and west, it will be bringing a lot more rain to areas farther north into the Carolinas and Virginia and eventually the Northeast. This shift does cause the system to interact with a slow moving boundary, and that increases the risk of flooding for millions of folks for the Carolinas up into Virginia, into the mid-Atlantic region, and eventually interior portions of the Northeast. And very heavy rain coming in bands right now are leading to extreme amounts of rainfall across South Carolina. This threat is going to slowly shift northward into North Carolina. Debby now, because of this tighter turn, is going to spend a little bit less time over the warmest waters of the Gulf Stream. Because the structure has shifted today from yesterday, I have downgraded the forecast to stronger tropical storm and not weaker Category 1 hurricane. The difference in wind, a little bit of an impact reprieve, but certainly the size of the system and the amount of rain coming are still going to be going to plan. Now here's a look at the tropics, and in the Atlantic, all we have right now to really be worried about is Tropical Storm Debby. Winds are about 40 to 45 miles per hour, and the system is getting ready to move offshore. Most of the heavy rain is already off the coast, but we are going to see potentially some re-strengthening here starting tomorrow or tomorrow evening. Now, there's another area of concern that we will keep an eye on at this point. Right now, struggling to develop due to stronger wind shear in the Caribbean. It has a better chance to slowly get together towards the Yucatan Peninsula and western Cuba. The time frame on that is not going to be until later this week. Maybe a better chance that it tries to form in the southwestern Gulf, but yet another system that could become a named storm affecting the Gulf Coast, this time primarily focused on Mexico and maybe deep South Texas. And in the Atlantic, just one storm to track. In the Pacific, we've had four. We've had now diminishing Carlotta, which ate up Daniel, which is no longer there. We have Amelia, which is falling apart and getting eaten up or absorbed into Fabio. So if we move this up a day here, you can see right now just two systems on the map. We have what's left of Carlotta. It has taken care of Daniel here. Those two interacted with each other. And we have Amelia, which is a stronger tropical storm, but Fabio is the one that's going to take over. And these two are going to do what's called a Fujiwara and eventually get absorbed into what's Fabio. That'll be the strongest system in the Pacific with the potential to become a higher end Category 1 storm. Nothing affecting land at this point, fortunately. Now, if we look closer at Debby here, you can see the forecast track takes it over water this afternoon with gradual intensification overnight to a moderate tropical storm, and then the uncertainty level starts growing on how far out this gets before it boomerangs back in, gets pulled right back into the coast, because it's not going to go up the coast. In fact, it's going to be making another landfall in South Carolina, really anywhere from, say, Hilton Head Island all the way up to Myrtle Beach. But because of this storm track now, instead of doing what yesterday the models were showing with it coming back in this direction, getting into the hot water, it's going to be limited in how strong it can get before it makes another landfall. So I guess that is good news if you want to look at it that way, but because the system is so slow moving, we are just dealing with incredible amounts of rain. Now, if you look at the structure of the storm, it definitely looks different than yesterday. The storm center is here very close to places like Richmond Hill, eventually near Savannah, and then heading out to sea. However, there's been a lot of dry air that's gotten into this system, which is great news for Florida, not so great for the health of Debby, and all of the heavy rain is well to the east of the center over parts of the Grand Strand and now moving into North Carolina. We have some bands of heavy rain as well out ahead of it, but right now the most intense rain is actually happening farther up the coast, which is better news for Savannah and Beaufort and Hilton Head and Bluffton and those areas, but worse news for places like Myrtle Beach and spreading inland to places like Florence and Loris and Dillon and those areas. So because the system is not retaining a lot of convection near its center, all of this is basically robbing this of becoming reorganized. So some good news there in the fact that this is probably not going to be a hurricane when it makes its next landfall in South Carolina on Thursday. But bad news in that we've got a lot more intense bands of rain here than maybe what were originally projected. And if you translate that northward, it takes all that heavy rain north on Thursday into parts of North Carolina and Virginia. So unfortunately, it's not all good news. It is just a shift in the forecast philosophy for the time being. You can see on the visible image, we do have some bands of showers spreading into the Carolinas, but very intense weather impacting the Grand Strand and eventually into the Cape Fear region here of North Carolina as well. And if you're back in Atlanta or Columbus, Georgia, or Alabama, you don't even hardly notice that there's a storm out there, just some high cirrus clouds, nothing of immediate threat at this time. So the forecast track has become more confident. There's still some disagreement on exact second landfall. But the one thing that we are seeing today is that because that core has gotten eaten up by some dry air, it is less likely to quickly intensify again. It will re-strengthen some, but it's going to take at least a day to reorganize. You can see potentially historic heavy rain continues in eastern South Carolina. The original worry was for that to be in the lower part of the coast around Charleston, which has gotten hit very hard. But now we're seeing that threat a little bit farther north and east than maybe what was originally forecast. So again, with this storm system, the uncertainties are higher than what we'd like, but the story remains the same. This is a big time rainmaker, and we are going to have some nasty surf as well coming up into the coastal section of South Carolina and North Carolina as well. In portions of Florida where Debby has moved away, we are still going to see a little bit of a risk for some heavier showers and storms, but the worst of it, fortunately, has come to an end. Let's talk about storm surge. We are definitely going to see that 2 to 4 foot storm surge, battering places like Pawleys Island, Murrells Inlet, the Charleston Harbor area going to continue to have flooding, even although the heaviest rain is starting to lift away from that particular spot. And we do see that threat shifting onto the south-facing coast of North Carolina, all the way up to Cape Fear and Bald Head Island. North of there, we also have a convex part of our coast that will take on some storm surge. Places like Cape Lookout and Atlantic Beach, Surf City, Topsail Island. We will see some damaging surf here as well. It's not going to be nearly as high as what the Big Bend of Florida has seen, but still it will cause some coastal problems and some flooding. Now, the good news today is that we no longer have a lot of model uncertainty on taking this back into Georgia, Alabama, or even towards the Gulf. We have seen the agreement in the forecast that I've had for a while that this is going to come in and hit South Carolina. After that, there is uncertainty, but fewer ensemble members taking this and fewer models taking this back out over the water, instead kind of going up the coast of the Northeast, even merging with a front up in here across eastern Canada as we get late into the weekend. There is some spread. There's still maybe one solution showing this trying to drift back into western Georgia, but I really don't think that's the case. Overall, we're seeing the track going through the center part of South Carolina, North Carolina, and then turning northeast and getting absorbed into a front here later this weekend. So the intensity forecast shows that the weakening has pretty much come to a pause now that it's getting ready to go back over the water. We will see some gradual intensification. This is about 60 miles per hour. There's a slight chance maybe it tries to get a little bit higher here, but again, we're probably looking at a moderately strong tropical storm. We're not looking at what I was thinking yesterday, and that's the Category 1 strength. The second landfall is going to be in about 48 hours, so sometime on Thursday, maybe in the morning, maybe towards midday, and then gradual weakening. More than likely, we have a depression in here by Thursday night and Friday, and it's mainly just a big rainstorm. The possibility of this to try to re-strengthen here is going to be very difficult. It may pick up some jet stream energy, so the winds do pick up some, but it's not going to be tropical at that point. So at this point, I think we're done with the hurricane threat. Very slight chance in here it tries to get to that, but right now the chances are looking a lot lower than they did yesterday, fortunately. And you can see that here on the ship's intensity forecast, less than 10% chance of major intensification, which is good news. The wind shear is low, so we do have favorable conditions for this system to grow in size. Water temperatures are still warm, but we're not really getting into a very favorable spot where this system is going to gain a major core again and try to intensify very quickly. So some good news there. Let's take a look at the upper level pattern, which is steering our system. The GFS, by the way, is the farthest west now, bringing the center back towards Augusta, Georgia here on Thursday night. The reason why is that we've got a bit of a trough digging down in here, which is going to curl the system in this direction, but we also have this ridge of high pressure as well as a little upper level low in here, and that is actually helping to enhance this ridge. Now the GFS is stronger on the ridge than the other models, and because of that it gets the system a little bit farther to the west than say the European, but all these models agree that the ridge is going to hold tight here until about Friday, and then our next trough moving down into the Great Lakes region, you see that big trough here, is going to create more of a southerly flow aloft and allow the system to move out in this direction. And honestly, these systems are probably going to merge at some point, and you just have remnant tropical moisture across the northeast. So we're not looking at a system that's going to try to reform into a major storm and hit Cape Cod and the islands and then Atlantic Canada. Instead, you're going to have a big sloppy mess with a front moving in on the weekend, as well as moisture from the tropics spreading northward. If you look at the NAM model, you do see the system does curl around and make a second landfall. The NAM has it somewhere near Georgetown here early in the morning on Thursday. This is 2 in the morning, and then the system slowly moves inland towards Charlotte, weakens into a depression, and then gets lifted northward by this front in Pennsylvania by Friday night. So it should be out of the Carolinas by the weekend now, whereas a few days ago that didn't look quite as certain. The ICON model is the one that had the strongest solution. It has started to back down. It does have a strong tropical storm curling in and making landfall over Myrtle Beach here around 2 in the morning on Thursday, and then weakening slowly as it moves up towards Greensboro and the Triad of North Carolina, and eventually accelerating northeast through the Shenandoah Valley and merging with our front here Friday night. And the European model, similar to the ICON, not quite as intense, but has our system making landfall very early on Thursday in South Carolina, down the coast from Murrells Inlet, and then turning northeastward and moving up through the western Piedmont of North Carolina, the Triad, Albemarle, those areas, and then eventually lifting northeast into the mid-Atlantic Friday night. So some big changes today in what we're seeing. We no longer have the opportunity for this to go far enough west where we have to worry about it in the Gulf Coast region after Friday. A little bit faster motion here and merging with a front over the weekend, so we'll dry out faster here in the Carolinas than maybe what it looked like a couple of days ago. But also the threat for heavy rain to get farther north and higher rain totals across portions of North Carolina here. I will show you the GFS real fast. This is the western outlier in that it doesn't bring the landfall in north of Charleston. In fact, it brings it into Hilton Head Island and the southern part of Beaufort County here early Thursday morning. And so it dawdles it around, but unlike yesterday, the GFS now picks us up by the trough, and it is lifting up into Virginia on Friday, into the Mid-Atlantic early Saturday, and exiting stage right Saturday night into the Maritimes of Canada. So better news there. The system is a little faster in the longer term now, so things do move along. But until we get to that point on Friday morning, we have a lot of mess to sort out still. Here's a look at the European wind forecast. And we see strong winds mainly confined to the coastal waters tonight and tomorrow, but then stronger winds moving in from the coast here tomorrow afternoon, or I should say late tomorrow night and Thursday afternoon here. And we may see gusts over 40 miles per hour over a large area of the Carolinas, heaviest winds on the coastline, even all the way up here to Cape Lookout. Wind gusts may get up to 60 miles per hour. That's the European model. The NAM model doesn't go out too far, but and let me load the latest for you guys. I think we have a 12Z now. But you can see the strongest winds remaining offshore, but we are going to see bands of heavy rain and gusty winds moving into Myrtle Beach tomorrow, and then Southport, Ocean Isle Beach here late tomorrow into tomorrow night, and then farther up the coast and extending up into maybe the Sand Hills and the southern Piedmont here by late tomorrow night. Thursday, the winds do pick up here on the NAM, showing gusts potentially over 50 miles per hour across the entire Piedmont of North Carolina. That includes Charlotte, that includes Rock Hill and Lancaster in South Carolina, that includes Florence, the PD River area, and it extends up towards the Raleigh-Durham and to the Research Triangle, and even towards Wilson and Rocky Mount here in the late morning hours on Thursday. And these winds could still pick up into some of the foothills region of Virginia as we get to Thursday afternoon. Finally, the HRRR model is going to look a lot like the NAM model through tomorrow afternoon. But the one thing of concern is that it's a little farther west and brings some strong winds into the Lake Marion area and back into the Charleston area as well. With all the rain that we're receiving here, if these winds get as high as this model shows, and they may not, then we do have an even greater chance of seeing lake flooding, coastal flooding, offshore flow, but it will still be flooding, and then power outages as a result. So be preparing for that here in the Palmetto State. Let's take a look at the forecast rain. And I do want to point out one other thing here. In the Northeast, your heavier rains are actually coming from this front that's going to be stalled and not from Debby. Now, south of this area, the heaviest rains will come from Debby. We're going to see some severe weather in this region again. We had an unwarned tornado hit Buffalo yesterday around lunchtime. Did a little bit of damage there, an EF1 tornado, and that certainly could be a concern again in parts of the Northeast today. But we're going to see a lot more rain with this boundary than we are with Debby for the Northeast. For the Southeast, we're seeing all of our rain from Debby, and we're seeing some extreme amounts here. Here's a look at the Carolinas first. And while the heaviest rain has lifted away from Hilton Head and from Savannah, we still have the risk for more heavy rain. But the heavier amounts are from basically I-26 on eastward. And some of these amounts are in excess of 17, 18 inches of rain. This is going to be pretty comparable to what was Hurricane Matthew back in the fall of 2016. Some of the same places getting blasted again. I don't think the river flooding will be as bad as Matthew. That was extreme for places like Lumberton and Fayetteville and Tarboro, North Carolina. We don't have the water being as high as it was back in September of 2016, but the rain totals are extreme at this point. We're seeing a foot of rain even into the Raleigh-Durham area, to Wilson, North Carolina, down to Jacksonville, New Bern. Many of these areas are going to see a foot of rain and potentially locally higher amounts beyond that. Farther to the north, we are going to see very heavy rain in the mid-Atlantic from our boundary. We'll start to see heavy rain drifting northward tomorrow afternoon into Thursday morning in Virginia. I would definitely be concerned in parts of Virginia, even Roanoke, Lynchburg, Farmville, these areas in here for potentially some significant flooding. With heavy rain falling in the mountains, it is going to go down the rivers here, the James River, the Dan River. We do have to be concerned with that kind of potential for flooding. And we are going to see some heavy amounts in between over the Chesapeake Bay region as well. Looking at the Northeast, a lot of our rain's coming the next couple of days across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York City. The potential for 3 to 6 inches of rain before Debby even makes it into the area. Debby accelerates over the weekend, so we may see incredible amounts of rain coming in 2 waves. One over the next couple of days, the next coming at the very end of the week. And finally, let's take a look at northern New England, including Massachusetts. And you can see our heaviest rain here is going to be Friday into Saturday, and then things should leave on Sunday for the most part. But widespread amounts of 2 to 4 inches of rain, locally higher amounts. And unfortunately, I do see some totals past 4 inches in Vermont where we've had incredible amounts of rain. I do think we could see additional flooding. Now, there's one other piece to this we have to be concerned with. That is the threat for some local severe weather, some tornadoes that can fire up here as the system gets ready to make landfall. We have the threat for tornadoes today near the coast, even into North Carolina. But if this storm strengthens some, we actually see somewhat of an increase in wind shear here and a better chance for tornadoes coming tomorrow afternoon and evening over the eastern portion of North Carolina. And if you look at some of this helicity here, some of these tracks, you can see we have more tracks shifting up into eastern parts of North Carolina here over the next 24 to 48 hours. And that's the area where we do need to be on the lookout for a brief tornado. Some of these may hit at night as well, tonight and again tomorrow night. Those are particularly dangerous. We've seen them before. Storms like Isaias produce some nasty tornadoes in the middle of the night, so do be on the lookout for that. The threat shifts even into southeastern Virginia, the Hampton Roads region here later tomorrow night. So that's it on Debby. As more changes come, I will let you guys know. Right now, the rest of the tropics are not looking super menacing. We do have this wave that's extremely sheared at this point. There's a flare-up of weather around Central America that is moving west. That could develop on the Pacific side. But the wave that we're tracking here in the Central Caribbean is going to be in a hostile environment until it gets up into about here later this week and into the weekend. We do need to keep an eye on it in the western and southern Gulf of Mexico. Right now, not seeing as many models showing a threat to the United States, but again, something we're going to have to still keep an eye on. The rest of the Atlantic is busy. We've got another area to keep an eye on here and another wave here, but a lot of stable air in place right now, keeping things at bay. That could start to change here next week as we see some more favorable lowering of pressures, but right now the pressure is high, and that is going to keep things from getting too intense. If you look at some ensembles just to track our next future systems, you can see less support here for something in the Western Gulf, but there is some support for something maybe affecting Mexico, slight chance maybe something in Texas. The next one behind it, again, not developing it very quickly, but as we get to the middle of next week, about a week from today, we may have a feature that will impact the Greater Antilles, and perhaps we may have our first fish storm of the season that recurs near or east of Bermuda. We haven't seen that since last year. But there are a few models that try to threaten the Bahamas as well at this point. So it is going to get a lot busier. As we look at trends here, we'll have a better idea of what might happen. But right now, the certainty level is not very high. Looking real quick at the GFS ensembles, for the most part, things are staying south of the U.S. We do have to keep an eye on things in South Texas. It no longer looks like a threat to Louisiana due to the fact that Debbie's affecting the landscape of the high pressure system that's going to build in from the north here this weekend. So right now it looks better, but we can't completely rule it out just yet. We do see some potential for the next system after that to form towards the middle of next week. And the GFS says it will recurve near or to the south and west of Bermuda. And then we have to keep an eye on Africa after that. I really appreciate y'all's time today. I hope you have a blessed day. Please, 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 in the Carolinas, Virginia, the Northeast, this weather is going to change so quickly that you just need to be on top of it. Make sure you've got a plan in place here in the event of an evacuation. I hope you all are safe. I am a believer in God. I am a Christian, and I am praying for the safety of everybody. It has nothing to do with my blessings to you as a meteorologist, but I think it does drive me to want to help and serve more people. So I do give all the honor and glory to God because I can't do it without him. He put me here on earth to do something like this. He put everybody on earth to do something important. We were all created in his image. And whether or not we choose to believe, that is totally up to us. But it's a decision that I made. The book of James 4:10 says, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother speaketh evil of the law and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. I think we're all so judgmental of things. We want to criticize each other and how we forecast things and how we go about our lives, how we raise our children. But with the division that we have and that we've had for years on earth here, with the sins that we all are committing here, we have the ability to eventually just turn it over to God, have him fight our battles for us, to humble ourselves and to accept that the path that we may be on now may completely change in God's eyes. I pray that everybody is safe, and I really do truly thank you all for your time today. We'll catch up again around this time tomorrow. See you soon.